Hello and welcome to PGurus channel. I'm your host Sri Iyer. I have with me Sri Abhijit Iyer Mitra. Yes, the defense analyst that we talked about on the Balakot episode and its aftermath. Now, we thought 3 weeks ago that we had laid this issue to rest when we talked about what kind of bombs were used, what was the strike capability of these bombs and so on. And we also talked about the Wing Commander Abhinandan episode also. We were in fact one of the first ones to accurately, and not me, but Abhijit was accurately say what exactly happened, right? So now, today we are trying to set to rest one more time, this claims by a US magazine called Foreign Policy, which said that two, US Armed Forces people talked to them and said that there was no missing inventory. Now, I thought it's best to go to our expert and ask his views on who is foreign policy, what is their locus standi in this, and then also the fact that today I have rebutted all their claims and showed the radar pictures. So take it away, Abhijit.
Okay, so foreign policy used to be run by Carnegie once upon a time, the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, and they were making profit out of it. So they sold it to a consortium later, and they kind of had a bit of a blip in between where they were really good. They were getting intelligent out-of-the-box articles. But now their readership has kind of mellowed out, and it's become your standard thing, which only publishes your old hacks who you read everywhere else. So it just becomes an echo chamber. So what happened was this lady called Lara Seligman, I think that's her name, she published a piece quoting two sources within the US military saying that we did a count, and the count showed up that all the Pakistani planes were accounted for. Now, the point is she had every right to do that. I don't see any malafide intent on her part, because a job of a reporter is that when you hear something like that, unfortunately, whether we like it or not, that 24/7 news cycle forces you to start reporting things even before you can do massive amounts of due diligence and verification and all of that. My issue with that was that it contradicted everything I knew about how that verification happens, which is mostly done through remote cameras. Because the American fear was that Chinese engineers, because Pakistan co-locates Chinese planes and American planes at the same base, was that Pakistani planes will be tinkered with by the Chinese who want to have a look at the technology and so on and so forth. They'll bring it close by, and even when the American plane's sensors are turned on, there doesn't even have to be a physical connection between the two. The air gap gets broken the moment the entire frequency of American radars and jammers and so on and so forth is turned on. The Chinese can pick up on all those signals and they can compromise that data. So they actually had cameras installed at every single PAF airbase capable of taking this. So they can actually tell. And if a plane has been missing for more than 10, 12 hours, clearly an F-16 can't stay up in the air for 10 hours at a stretch. It needs to refuel after every 2-3 hours or so. It has to come out. So there are ways that they could have confirmed the numbers almost instantaneously within 5 to 6 hours of being told a plane was down, right? So first of all, the very nature of this lineup and so on and so forth that both Foreign Policy and Asia Times reported doesn't sound legit to me. When America goes in for physical inspection is for two reasons. One is the periodic inspection, where to check that nothing is off or did they miss something. And the second is when they suspect something has gone wrong, then they will demand an immediate surprise inspection, which then has to be given to them. Now, the nature of this is that America does not talk about the outcomes of these investigations. They are classified secrets that stay secret between Pakistan and America. And agar, this is like a Hindi saying, Miya Bibi Razi to kya karega Kazi. This is between Americans and Pakistanis. If they have differences, they will agree themselves. Now, one of the very good things that this did was, there were the original sale of planes to Pakistan. They were tinkered to allow them to carry nuclear bombs. Today, the Pakistani F-16 cannot carry a nuclear bomb because the upgrades that America did to those Pakistani planes saw to it that they can no longer carry nuclear bombs, right? which is a very important thing that the Americans did to us, which for us, which we don't thank them enough for, but they did do it for us. But let's see where this has gone from there. What this FP story started off is that India has a clear circumstantial case that a Pakistani two-seater plane has been shot down. Circumstantially, we believe that it is an F-16. Now, what FP did was it basically quoted a he said, she said story. And then the entire Indian commentariat then says, see, white person publication says, quoting unnamed sources, he said, she said, and that is more powerful than circumstantial evidence that India has. Since then, of course, the print has come out with an article showing you the entire list of circumstantial evidence. And just a few hours back, my friend Vishnu Shom from NDTV has put out the images of those radar intercepts. All of this is very clear. A lot of us in the press had seen those radar intercepts before. The Air Force's problem in releasing it was that it showed certain classified electronic signatures which should have been sensitivized and so on and so forth before public release A. But B, they were worried that because it looks like a cartoon, basically like a 1980s Pac-Man game almost, even cruder than that, they'll just say, because when people don't want to believe you, they just don't want to believe you. End of story. We have seen these intercepts before. But the thing is, because they're of such rudimentary quality, anybody can say, you just got a computer graphics guy to do this, and he's basically seen to it the F-16 disappears, and this is all tamasha. But understand, what has happened is that a whole section of the Indian press has taken this thing that, in spite of a huge list of circumstantial evidence, first is the video of two pilots. So let me again now list out all the circumstantial evidence sequentially that we had. The first was the video that came out of two ejections. There was something exploding nearby. Then there was a sympathetic detonation nearby, which is usually the sign of a missile exploding and the shrapnel then damaging the plane, which then has some kind of a detonation. You then clearly have two parachutes coming down, right? This was the first thing that we saw. None of us did an in-depth analysis of it or a high resolution analysis, but that was a two-seater. Second, what happened was Major General Asif Ghafoor, and you can still see this on his timeline, right, says that we have 3 pilots in our custody. That 3 then becomes 2. And then you have stories coming out about how one pilot was lynched and another pilot was died in hospital. Anyway, this is again, he said, she said. That's not the circumstantial evidence. The circumstantial evidence is that Pakistan puts out this guy who claims he's got a kid. The minister tweets it. One of their minister tweets it. He, unfortunately, has an F-16 roundel on his jacket here. And so all the official accounts then take down that picture of him, because they then realize it means that the F-16s were involved in a skirmish which they shouldn't have been involved in. Then what happens is, we know that Wing Commander Abhinandan has been captured. He is then flashed on TV. Then what happens is that after a few days, this Asif Ghafoor gentleman starts tweeting this picture of these 4 missiles that he claims proved that they weren't shot. And if you look at those missiles, 2 are very clearly damaged from the crash landing. But the other 2 are very, very clearly damaged through detonation. Clearly they were fired. Clearly they detonated because the entire middle section is missing. Now the problem that people make is we think that a missile is like a spear. That to kill you, the tip of the spear has to enter you. Otherwise, it doesn't count. That is not how it works. So normally, if this is the old style, the Ramayana, those arrows coming, Ravana firing arrows and Rama firing arrows. This is Ravana and this is Rama's arrow, and it has to penetrate him like so, right? That isn't what happens in modern aerial combat. What happens in modern aerial combat is, this is your plane. The missile will come close to you like this, right? Because it can never, the kinetics of it are so great that a modern fighter plane just has to pull about between 4 and 7 G to escape a missile maneuvering at 12 G, right? So the escape required for a 12 G maneuvering missile isn't all that great. So missiles don't kill through hits. What they do is they line up close to you as close as they can, and then they detonate near you. And because the warhead is something like 25 to 30 kilos, the shrapnel that it spreads basically shreds your aircraft. That's what happens with these things, which is what has happened with these missiles. And obviously, therefore, because if you look at it, if you look at pictures of suicide bombers, the way we know that, the forensic method of determining who the suicide bomber was is to look for the head. When you find the head of somebody intact, you know this guy was the bomber. Because a suicide vest, what happens is when you're wearing a suicide vest in your chest, the explosive force goes like this. It clean severs your head, which then survives the blast. It's just like that. So the fact that only the tail and the head of these two missiles survived showed you that they had an internal explosion, not a sympathetic detonation, which would have, what happens is, the explosive is best when it maintains its parity. If it gets punctured or something like that, you have an uneven explosion. So the missile won't explode properly. This is a clean explosion where no part of the middle of the missile can be recovered. So it's clearly detonated by itself of its own free will, and not because somebody hit it or it crash landed during when the plane was crashing. This was the next piece of circumstantial evidence. The next big pieces of circumstantial evidence that we have now is all been listed out by the print today, and it's a very good piece, which I highly recommend everybody reads, which is showing you the parachutes. Those parachutes, now we know why those guys were lynched, why the Pakistani pilots were lynched when they landed, because those parachutes look like the Indian flag. They've got green and orange on them. If they had just green and white on them, they wouldn't have been lynched like this. The third point that it makes that's very clear is that some of the paint there. Now, if you look at our MiG-21s, they have the shiny, ugly paint. It looks like those cheap tin things that you buy in Mukambikai's store in Mylapore to eat your rasam sadam. Those ugly metal plates. That's the kind of paint it has, and it looks very crude. This is very sophisticated matte finish paint, which doesn't exist. And the problem is here we shot ourselves in the foot because you had some over-smart Indian guys who then decided that a MiG-21 engine was actually an F-16 engine, and what was clearly a MiG-21 internal part was an F-16 internal part. They started spraying propaganda, and it lost steam, right? But what does it tell you? That the Pakistanis have been caught lying over and over again, but Indian journalists trust them. And yes, the Indian government has also lied on certain things, right? I wouldn't say it's the government, but it's been certain over-enthusiastic types who have decided to analyze things by themselves. They've also been lying and they've also been caught. But then, where is the balance of truth out here? Ultimately, it falls to this, that you have a very, very clear circumstantial case. And then what happened was, finally, this foreign policy piece came out the very next day. In my opinion, the correct option was a guy came and told Hindustan Times that, look, buddy, we don't discuss these things. So if somebody is discussed with you, it's absolutely wrong. And second, we know for a fact that these lineups aren't the way things are conducted. Anybody who has any knowledge of the way American end-user verification happens will tell you lineups aren't the way it's done. Because, you're in a war situation like that, you're basically presenting a concentrated target to your enemy. All 70 of Pakistan's fighters line up. That is like a juicy opportunity waiting for India to hit it during that exact time, when they're all down fueled, down engined and all of that. It doesn't happen that way. So you basically have a lot of people who know nothing about defense, who fancy themselves as great defense experts, talking about defense. And when you call them out, the people who should know better, and I'm very disappointed by them, by the way. When you call them out on it, they claim, anonymous source. So, I'm kind of sick of this nonsense now. Like, I'm almost tempted to say that these guys are actually coordinating with Pakistan because their hatred of Narendra Modi, for better or worse, is so great that they've just forgotten sight of what the national interest is. Not that you shouldn't question your government. You should question your government. But to take he said, she said over clear circumstantial evidence, to me is just, you're a sad, pathetic, sorry to say this, but sad, pathetic piece of shit.
Let's hope that this recent press conference by the Air Force showing the radar pictures, lays this thing to rest. In fact, the more the opposition lingers on this, the more it's going to hurt them, because when their turn came to respond to attacks on 26/11, they did nothing. So people are almost always going to say, Pulwama, Balakot, 26/11 what? And that's where their narrative is lost. So I hope that, the opposition learns from this. and move on to something more tangible that people can believe when they say it. So,
sorry, just one last piece of pessimism, since I'm such a good pessimist. Have you seen Rahul Gandhi? Rahul Gandhi and learning don't go in the same sentence.
well, we don't know. Go ahead, please continue.
That's it. I'd just like to say that, just one thing which I feel is unfair, that 2611, our response was actually a very good response, because we pretended that we didn't actually hold back. We pretended we were holding back publicly. It forced the Americans to crack down on Pakistan big time, because if you look at the number of attacks after that, they came down drastically. And we basically set Balochistan on fire, which cost thousands upon thousands of Pakistani military lives. So I tend to be a bit more forgiving of the Congress, and especially of my dear friend P. Chidambaram, who's also your dear friend, bosom buddy, P. Chidambaram. Yeah, so I think I have a slightly more positive view of 26/7.
I see your viewpoint, and I respect that. Now, I have one other question before we log off on this topic. Have you been following the revolts in Pashtun province for the last few days or so? The uprising going on there.
Well, see, I'm not convinced there is an uprising going on there, because, I just got back from Afghanistan, from a 10-day trip of Afghanistan, where, I was interviewing certain Taliban as well. And what surprised me was the level of Pashtun unity with the Taliban. Ultimately, when it comes down to it, they're much more, there are Pashtun brothers and so on and so forth. And Pakistan has done such a good job of socializing the Pashtun and making them into quasi-Punjabis. They're so Punjabized in that sense that they don't even see it. So I would take this Pashtun rebellion with a huge pinch of salt, because, I think Indians have a tendency to see Pakistan as much weaker than it actually is. When in fact, when it comes to security, it's a very strong state. There are limits to what it can do when you have a geographical separation like Bangladesh. But in Pakhtunkhwa proper, I wouldn't nurse any false hopes in this regard.
And I think I see your viewpoint. I mean, this is the country has to realize that it's going down a path of ruin, and I don't know when that realization is going to come to that country, because they have essentially hived off their political structure. Essentially, whoever comes, he's a selection process. The prime minister is just a figurehead.
So I've never been to Pakistan, though I have lots of Pakistani friends, and what I get is that, even though they take a very strong, hard, hawkish line in public, in private, they know Pakistan is screwed. The problem that they have is that they can't see a way out. There is no, forget face-saving way out. They can't even see any kind of way out. They feel they've gone so far down the Chinese path that they now can't extricate themselves from it without severe loss to national power. They've alienated the Americans so much, the Americans aren't going to trust them again. What do? They've got no money left. Ultimately, not one of the choices that exists with Pakistan today is viable to them. So, I honestly don't know what they know. They're not as deluded as we think we are. Their public is deluded, but that's a different matter. The people in power are a lot more intelligent, and they know what's gone wrong. The problem is they don't see any other way, which is very dangerous, because there's nothing more dangerous than a cornered rat. Sorry to use that expression to my Pakistani friends, but you should be most scared of a state when it feels it has no options left.
But how long do you think Pakistan can persist with this 1,000 cuts policy that it's inflicting upon India?
I personally think it can continue with it forever, because all you'll see is a natural Talibanization of the Pakistani establishment itself. If you look back at images of Pakistan in 48, 49, right up to the 50s, even Benazir Bhutto in the 60s in Oxford or Cambridge, wherever she was, she used to wear saris and things like that, saris with half blouses and so on and so forth. Today, at least in public, in private, I can tell you the Pakistani elite are probably even more licentious and scandalous than our elite are. But in public, the image that they have to portray of excessive religiosity and so on and so forth is just incredible. And see, they don't care that much because every Pakistani worth his salt, his or her salt, has dual citizenship. So when they can't deal with Mullah land for more than about 2 weeks, they go off to Dubai, Dub Vegas as I call it, Dub Vegas or Washington DC or New York or London, where their second houses are and their second passports are. And they lead normal lives. And when they have to posture and pose because that's where their source of money is, they'll come back to Pakistan for 2 weeks and live there. So, they lead such a disassociated life. They're not invested in their country as much as we think they are. So it's more like, how you can be a lot more frivolous with someone else's money, but not with your money. It's like that. That distance between them and Pakistan is so great.
Now, I guess we can go on, and this topic is one of those things that will invoke more conversations. Thank you very much, Abhijit. We will be back with more conversations. Hopefully, maybe after the elections, or if something happens before that, I'll be sure to connect with you, and we will again share our thoughts with our viewers. And viewers, please share, tweet, retweet, and watch our videos. We usually have something beyond what you find in channels. There's a lot more information here. The idea is to educate you, not trying to tell you this is the right thing or the wrong thing. That is up to you to make your decisions. Thank you very much. Thank you, Abhijit.
Thank you.